Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most runaway work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're coming at you live in the Discord. Yes, if you want to be a party to finalizing discussion question discussions, then you should join the Discord at duffmedia.com/Discord, because sometimes we talk about stuff that doesn't go into the recording.
Yes, but one of those things that is not that is that we're running the costume contest. That's in the recording. You're listening to it right now.
And that makes sense. That's why it's such a good segue. So yes, we're currently running the Halloween costume contest, where you can make a costume from any Wildbow work. And you can find more information about that on the Duff Media website, duffmedia.com.
Yes, and the last little thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the chapters, Ruben, is on the day we are recording this, but I know it's going to come out a few days later, so it'll be even more relevant to those of you not listening live. Pale is now longer than Worm in terms of like time written. Like obviously it overtook the word count a fair ways back, but like the time between latest chapter and first chapter is now longer for Pale than it was for Worm.
So are there any metrics by which Pale is still not the longest story?
Chapter count might still be lower. Well, it depends whether you count extra materials, but because Wildbow used to do the 3-chapter weeks a lot, which it seems like I'm remembering back to the Deep Impact days, and I don't know how he or us did that. Yeah, chapter count might be the one. I'd have to go double check, but I do think there's still probably a few more chapters of Worm.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, well, we'll get the stats on that, and soon Pale, I'm sure, will overtake even it too in every single metric.
Well, we're very close to it's Worm, Ward, and Twig are all within about, I think it was like 50 days of each other in terms of length written.
Yeah,
which is like freakishly close if you think about it. That's like it's like 2.5 years, and all of them somehow landed within the same 2 months worth of length.
Yeah,
and because they're such differently, like it's not like Wildbow has a formula. Like they're all very differently structured. It's wild how close they ended up being.
Yeah, that is interesting. So wait, how far are we from that?
It's like just under 2 months before we hit Twig, which was the longest. That's
interesting. So by that metric, which is probably the most data-driven metric for predicting when the story's going to end, we're pretty close. We're looking at the end of this arc, effectively.
Yeah, I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility that Pale is sitting right around this same area, but fool me once, etc.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, but still interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Anyway, enough data discussion. Let's talk about some actual chapters, shall we? In Absentia 21.2 and 21.3, which I felt we've been really writing some high-octane chapters recently, and these two chapters were very good to bring us back down to a resetting the stage. Here's what's going on. Prep for next chapter where things are going to start popping off again, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely feels much more like the step back preparation-y chapters after shit has been popping off for a while, I suppose.
Yeah. But it begins with Verona and the gang watching some old folks who twist, it turns out, are Barbie and Ran. They are kind of observing them being observed by an other.
Yeah, and the Barbie and Ran connection is a fun one. I certainly didn't see it coming. It wasn't. It wasn't in the list of the very exhaustive list that we went through in 21.1 of where they could go. Yeah. And I think we've heard about them like a handful of times. Like I was pretty instantly like, oh yeah, that's Lucy's grandparents. But like, I never would have remembered that on my own.
Yeah, exactly. It was a really great, I don't know, just a really fun start to the chapter of like, what the hell is this? That's what we're doing. Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
And it's like, it's a fun choice because grandparents who you're not that close to is a really good one for like it is a very close connection and also not like,
yes,
as somebody who I think is even less close to their grandparents than Lucy is to Barbie and Rand, like, but there's still, because of the way family is treated in society, it is still a very important connection in a way, even if you're not close with them.
Yeah.
So it's like both super close and super not. And that's a very awkward sort of spot to be in, which makes it perfect for something like this.
Yeah, for sure. Um, but yeah, so just like I guess I want to talk about in these two chapters as a whole, the vibe of the Kenneteers on the run, I think is really fun. Like we're back in what I feel like we were in pre summer break, which was this like we really have to worry about constraining our resources. Like I don't know, it's just this fun dynamic of really feeling the pressure being turned up on them over time as they slowly burn through resources. I just think it's great.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. It was like a fun, almost nostalgia trip.
Yes.
This chapter in particular, but next one too. Of just like I hadn't realized how much I missed just the three Kenneteers against the world sort of vibes. Like the three of them on the fly, kind of bouncing ideas off each other, working as a team. Like there's something very classic. Yeah, as you said, Arc 12, Arc 13, and earlier vibes to them just sitting in a connection blocker on the sidewalk, figuring out how to deal with an other they don't really understand. Like this is it's something I hadn't realized had completely disappeared until it came back. Um,
Yeah, it's really fun to have back. I love it. I really love the vibe of it.
yeah, it is. It's just it's the perfect time for it too, as they're like, it's literally just the three of them. Like their whole thing has
Mm.
always been this community, and that's
Well,
why.
and Snowdrop.
Well, yeah, just the three of them. No, like, yeah, like just this vibe that they've had for a while now since Avery left, and they've been away from each other in the banners, and I guess it just makes sense. Like they're starting to fade into each other's banners. This is something that was pointed out to me. I don't know
Yeah,
who first noticed it and how they noticed it because it's so fucking faint, but they are there.
yeah. I'm really like even looking at it. You can
Yeah,
barely
yeah.
see them. Like somebody posted in the Discord a crop of just the bit that you're meant to see, and I was looking at it for about
That's
5 minutes
almost harder.
before I finally saw. Like I was trying to be like, oh, are
Yeah.
they in the trees somewhere? But no, they're just like very faintly there.
Yeah, like I was pretty proud of myself for like noticing that in Gillette's interlude, like the Verona one had been flipped around, and like because I felt that's the sort of thing I
Yeah,
wouldn't have noticed
that
before
was a
the
good
the
one.
cracks, like the cracks that trained me to look at it, and so I was like, I thought I was doing pretty well, but like whoever spotted those faded Kenneteers is freakishly observant.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
But yeah, I don't know. It just sort of like as they're fading back in, as we're like, I don't know, just reaching this part of the story where the four of them are ostracized out on their own. Like they have to come together as a unit. It just feels so good that it's reminding me of back in the old days of just these little like them doing the little diagnosis on the divine goblins connections and stuff. It was just great.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, but yes,
Oh, can we talk about sorry, just like Barb and Rand for a bit because like Lucy kind of, I think we knew some of this, but like she sort of goes over the whole way they kind of have like shirked like Lucy and Jasmine since
mm,
her dad died.
mm,
Which we don't know Lucy's dad's name, do we? I don't think. Anyway,
mm, no,
um, like I think we knew like some of this, but it's just like I guess seeing that they have multiple homes and stuff is really just making me like re angry over like just how much Jasmine has really struggled in so many ways and just isn't really getting help from Barb and Rand when it seems like they totally could. Um,
mm,
and it's like it's this weird thing because it sounds like they don't prioritize their biological family over the kids they adopt. Which that part I'm like, hey, that's cool. Like your bio family isn't more your family or more special if you're going to adopt kids. I can fully support that. But like as Lucy says, there's almost she can't figure out the pattern for how they pick their favorites, and so like that
yeah,
part's really frustrating.
yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know. It is pretty strange that they just don't really have a relationship anymore.
Yeah, like if
Although,
if if Jasmine hadn't had kids with Wobbo saying her dad's name is Roy in the chat,
yeah,
like I could almost see her falling out of their life or whatever in that situation. But like when she is taking care of your grandkids, adopted or bio, it seems weird to have like left her, essentially without a job for years and stuff. Like
yeah, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's
maybe they didn't like Paul.
maybe, yeah. I could definitely see that, and Paul
The
kind of
irony.
getting close enough to it being, Paul being a significant enough member of Jasmine's life that they were like, okay, time for us to take a back seat.
Yeah, but that's when you gotta swing in after they break up with the "I told you so's," and then you help her after you dish out the "I told you so's." That's the
Yeah,
honourable thing to do.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because Barb does call Jasmine immediately after
Yeah.
what we're about to see, which is like indicates that they are still, I don't know, like there's not an active distancing happening there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, honestly, part of it for me, I don't know if we've heard. I think we know Jasmine's family is quite conservative. I don't know. Well, Barb and Rand seem very like
Yeah,
California
they seem,
conservative,
yeah,
potentially. Like in that sense, like maybe they just the family isn't excelling, so they don't get the attention. Like the whole vibe of like
yeah,
having the snowbird house in California just reads to me like that sort of person who's a bit more like I don't know, just more interested in helping people who are already doing well or something. I don't know. Yeah.
mm,
Also, it could just be
mm,
the distance. Like, do they have a house near where? I mean, I guess they do, but yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Um, anyway, the reason the Kenneteers are here is because they're trying to get a message to Jasmine that they're okay, and it works pretty well. And this, as we said, this is like a very scrappy Kenneteer vibe thing. Like,
Yeah,
come up with an idea for some little scrappy thing, pull it off, do it, and it works perfectly. It's like a very clever trick. It's just great. It's very fun.
yeah, and there's like the diagnostic diagrams that they're doing to like figure it out, like that old flow of the three of them doing stuff, getting information, being like, okay, what does this mean? All interpreting it in their own ways and working together
Mm,
like that. Like
mm.
again, I hadn't realized how much I missed it. It's so fun.
Yeah, it is very fun, isn't it?
Um, I I also do love the bit where Barb calls Jasmine, and like Jasmine pretty quickly sort of picks up on what's happening and just
Yep.
starts talking about like how proud she is of Lucy and all this. And it's like a really tearjerker sort of moment where it's
Mm,
just like all the stuff that's gone on with Lucy and Jasmine. It feels so nice to hear that Jasmine being like, no, she's doing the right thing right now. Um,
yeah.
like in this indirect way. But I did think it was kind of hilarious that, like, yeah, Lucy starts crying and she's like, "Oh, I don't know why this is getting to me," and I was like, "The fuck are you It's so obvious why this is getting to you. What do you mean?"
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like it's obviously a pretty emotional moment. Not to mention we find out Juliet is still. I mean, we
Yeah,
didn't find this out, but they find out Juliet is still alive. Like emotions are high. Tension is. It's a kind of release of tension that leads to
yeah,
emotional catharsis. Um, but yeah, so Avery and Verona head into their house to scope it out and find a bunch of gross other nests. No, I don't have any comment on this, I guess.
yeah. I I think it's funny. So they bring up later the idea that they're not convinced Charles expected this guy to be like reproducing and making younglings, and I think the Lord maybe questions that to a degree later on when he confirms that some of these may not necessarily just be nests or like it might be tied together, but like it does. It has been a pattern for Charles that he hasn't necessarily done his due diligence with the shit that he creates or sets on the
Mm,
world. Like I'm thinking about when the Lords were trying to free the Bjorgmen and stuff. Like the accusations of Charles not necessarily being reckless but being pretty sloppy are certainly like this trends in that direction, and that's going to have to catch up with him at some point, right?
yeah, I mean, I guess we are starting to see potentially the impact of this starting to catch up to him. I don't know. I found the most interesting tidbit about this is like Charles set this up previously before this all went down, which
Yeah,
means he was already playing the long game. I mean, I get the vibe maybe this was like primed and ready to be, maybe those young divine goblin things would have hatched or been more kind of ready to fight after around the time the truce ended potentially, or I don't know. Like he clearly was planning for this kind of stuff pretty early.
yeah. Honestly, I got the vibe it was even well before the truce, because the truce was
Mm,
only like a week or two ago, I think, in story time.
mm,
So I'm thinking this thing could have been here for like over a month was sort of the vibe I got, which is yeah, I mean I guess this whole thing of like Charles you saw that something like this could be coming. It feels like Marissa might have had a hand in this too, because it's that very fairy thing of like planning for all the contingencies.
mm.
Like like Faye, remember, aren't so much about correctly predicting the outcome so much as trying to account for every potential outcome. So
Mm,
it does just sort of feel like this thing that Marissa could have consulted him on ages ago. Of like, well, if we do end up fighting the Kenneteers, we'll want people here, 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 blah blah blah.
mm.
That feels like the scenario that probably happened to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
But that says a lot that he was prepared for this sort of outcome for quite a while ago.
Yeah, I think they knew that they were going to be obviously going to be fighting the Kenneteers, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
which makes sense. It's just I don't know. Yeah, you could have compromised and whatever. That's like a 3 arc ago discussion.
hmm, yeah. Um, so yeah, the trio do their investigation and then visit the local lord to let them know he is cordial but not overly friendly, and he's got a family of little lords to be.
Little lordlings, yeah. I love how they all introduce themselves because there's this very fun vibe. Of like again, the three of them felt like little juniors in a way they haven't for 8 or 9 arcs now. Um, like just the way there's that bit where Verona kind of goes to step forward and the others have to like correct her and stuff like. Um, but there's also these moments where you can see the growth. Like Avery, just in her initial introduction, is like, "That's my familiar Snowdrop. She has a weird rule of discourse." Just like
Mm,
nipping that in the bud after the last Lord introduction, where Snowdrop went crazy.
mm.
Um, I just loved that. And then obviously fucking Verona still doing her Daenerys impression.
Yeah. I found it really interesting that there's like a family that their practice seems to be lordships, right? Like that's the implication that we get from this chapter.
Oh well,
Um,
the practice is the gardening, but like to do it well, it requires lordships. Was the vibe that
yes,
I got.
yes. But I just thought this was really interesting. Like, it's such a. Surely it would make you such a. I don't know. Like, it would be a very brutal and kind of hard fought existence. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends where you're trying to be lord of, right? Like Moira is sort of threatened with if you're shit, you will get a shit lordship.
Mm,
Which presumably is kind of less cutthroat and competitive because who wants to be the lord of a small desert Californian town, right?
mm,
Um, I do think it's almost saying a lot more about the broader issues of the practice that people like Miss and Rook have been talking about this whole story because it's very much like this family is going around and setting up lordships, kind of like Massa was, but not as some conquest. It's just like a side effect or like a passive thing around their practice. Like, oh, it's more efficient for our business if we go and make these irreversible lordships, and our family is growing because it's working, so we'll keep doing more. Like, this is exactly the sort of shit Rook in particular, but also Miss have sort of said is the problem with this system.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know. I mean, on the other hand, though, if they're good at being lords, it's probably not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, but like I keep coming back to that idea. Like lordships are kind of irreversible. Like
Yes.
if you get like a shit one or whatever, like yeah, I don't know. This like it
It's a good
fundamentally
point.
changes the way stuff works. Like it's just it's part of this passive human conquest of the
Mm,
world.
mm. Yeah, that's
And
a
like
good call.
I think it's very well suited. It makes sense that this is the Californian snippet that we're seeing. Like if I just think about the time we spent in California and what the
Mhm.
vibe is there. Like of course the people just sort of naturally taking over the land because it's better for their startup business. Like that just it just works.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, the trio depart from this lordship um, and head to their next refuge, which is the Ted household. And they get a chance to feel a bit more like themselves before they start to plan their next move. Um, and what a fun place to be. Liberty obviously is very fun. The goblins are hilarious. And America's like, I
Yeah,
guess hostility is a really fun vibe.
she's
Tempered
fun.
hostility, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I feel like I used to say all the time, America would be really cool if she could just chill out. And I think she sort of makes most of that step here where yeah, when she's not being an active piece of shit, she's pretty fun.
Yeah,
Um
and like even next chapter when she is
Yeah.
raising concerns. They're in a very like actually I think trying to be helpful kind of way.
It's a pretty valid thing that she calls out next
Yes.
chapter. Like,
Yes.
we'll get to that. But yeah, I agree. She definitely seems to have, tempered and kind of accepted that, what they were doing. And we probably owe a lot to Liberty for that. Um,
True.
but yeah, this is a fun sort of setup for next chapter, but also like based on the last chapter, like the Garricks were the obvious place for the Kenneteers to stay, and that got taken away from us.
Mm.
And then here with Liberty feels like the only other strong option they had. So there's also really a sense here like this is the last good place that they really have, or safe bet to be a good place, I suppose.
Mm.
Like it continues to get worse from here in terms of where they can potentially go. Um, so I also like that we're continuing to like, as you say, like burn through some of these resources in a way. Like that, this was going to originally be a place they went to when they really needed it, and they've already reached that point like 2 days in.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, to touch on some of the fun stuff, because part of me just wanted to pull out almost everything Liberty in America said in both chapters to quote it. Um, I love this wildly thorough wardrobe of all genres of like satirical outfit. Like it feels very American Liberty, but it's also just hilarious to me that now for the next little while, the Kenneteers are going to be going around in clothes that don't quite fit them, but are also like kind of costumey. Like I don't know, it's just funny.
Yeah. Yeah, I do love that they have to wear, they have to do a photo shoot. Silly.
Yeah. The photo shoot's so good too because it's like Liberty. That's like Liberty asking for the payment.
Yes.
But even the payment is kind of a favor to them because she's like, in payment you have to autograph a photo and I'll put it behind me for my like Twitch streams,
Yeah.
which will do you like get you massive cred in the Warrens.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah. Liberty is great.
yeah. Yeah, again, it feels very similar to that whole thing with Avery and the Garricks last time, where they were sort of where she was like, "I need to make this up to you," and they're like, "Oh, we're sort of past that point." Like, Liberty isn't keeping score, I guess. Like her thing of like, "Yeah, you need to pay me, but pay me and I'll do a favor for you." It's just so nice.
Mm.
Um, I think the last time Liberty in particular had this sort of conversation with them was when she told Avery she needed to set her up with a redhead, and hinted at her brother, which was
Hmm.
in retrospect Avery kind of whooshing over what Liberty was really asking for. But um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's just nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's good vibes. It's good vibes here.
But to touch back on Verona, because this is a Verona chapter, despite the fact that we've been talking about Lucy's family and Avery's friend Liberty most of the time.
Mm.
Um, I really enjoy the vibe that we get here of like Verona shows up in the house and it's so busy and like extroverted, and like Verona has a sense of like, oh, I don't think I'm going to relax here as much as Avery's going to. Um,
Mm.
it reminded me of going to like friends' places for sleepovers the first time as a kid and just feeling like really awkward in the space, like. And having that sense that Verona brings up here of like this is what it's going like to be like everywhere until we get this solved. Like this isn't going away. Like that's like I don't know. It's like such a passively ominous setup for the rest of the arc that it's just like they're going to be kind of out of their comfort zone in some way all the time from now on.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess like because that's the thing, right? This whole story has been about the community they were growing, and now they've been stripped away from
Yeah.
it, and it's
They've
just
been
them.
fully cut off from it.
And this is like, I guess the Kenneteers really come to terms with that. They're back together. We're talking about how nice it is that it's back to just the three of them, and we love seeing the three of them. But like it's pretty important that it's also now just the four of them.
Yeah. 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 It's sad, I guess, but that's what they're fighting against. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, let's get straight into the next chapter. In Absentia 21.3, from Avery's perspective, um, Avery cannot sleep, partially due to window liquor doing his thing.
Goblins.
Yeah, this is a very fun, I guess, little mystery to start the chapter with. This squeaking sound that plays throughout the early part of the chapter. And I don't know about you, Elliot. I kind of wrote it off as just some ambient house noise. We're innocent, so our brain is designed to write off things like this. But no, Avery cracks the case, but still can't sleep.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought like America was fucking with her. That was my first thought. I was like, "Is Mary letting goblins fuck in the house or something to piss them off?"
Mm.
But it was just Window Licker doing his thing. I think the thing that really made me irritated for Avery was how irregular the sound is. Like she keeps noting, it's not like you know how like when a tap is dripping or something, you can kind of get used to it because of the rhythm to it.
Mm.
Like Window Licker isn't giving her that. He's like inconsistent in his timing, and that just like that's the part that I think would drive me nuts. Is you can't like tune it out.
Yes. It's irregular enough that it's very annoying.
Um, and I think this is fun too. Like 21.2 ended with that note of how Verona wasn't quite in her comfort zone when she came into this house, and like yeah, they were gonna stick her on the bed in the like public thoroughfare, and she's like, no, I'm sharing a bed with Lucy. Like,
Mm.
um, and this chapter, the Avery chapter, opens up with like also kind of letting us know how Avery also isn't like doing that well and isn't that comfortable. Like she's sitting here with insomnia. She's watching old videos of her and Nora, which is just like a whole emotional fucking motherload right now. Um, she's seeing wolves in all the shadows. Like she's still very much on edge, and whereas like Verona was kind of like, oh, this is Avery's chill out place. And we jump into Avery's head, and it's like, it's not working for Avery either. They're just all very on edge.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of again, like tense and stressful situation, huh?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so Avery bumps into Verona, also not able to sleep. They have this hushed conversation. Verona is confiding all her fears in Avery, who does her best to allay them. That's a nice conversation.
It is. There's something so sweet about like the late night insomnia D&M. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like whenever it comes up in movies or TV shows too, I don't know. There's something really like heartwarming and intimate about like two people in the kitchen, with just like the light in the hallway or something, like lighting it, just having a big D&M. I don't know.
Mm. You can reveal all your fears and vulnerabilities in the nighttime because then no one can see them because it's night.
Yeah.
And then by the daytime, they'll be forgotten about. No, yeah, it's a very sweet conversation. I love that this as a kind of check in on where Verona is at, I guess, and her talking about how she's figured herself out and has really started to be more confident in who she is now that she's been given space to actually, do that outside of Brett's influence, I guess.
Mm.
Um, the fear that she will backslide is a very interesting one. I feel like she's got a level of kind of self-reflection and knowledge of who she is that's kind of impossible to forget about or unlearn. But I don't know if she's in a more stressful situation or if one of the
Yeah.
Kenneteers dies. Who knows?
Yeah, well, she brings up because Avery sort of says the same thing. She's like, I think like you've learnt like ways to cope that will be important. And Verona's like, yeah, well, magic could mean that I unlearn them or something. It's like, well, yeah, okay, like technically there is a path where you backslide, but like it seems unlikely. But I get why she would have this fear. Like the fear made sense to me. It makes sense as an illogical kind of fear to have in a situation like this.
Mm.
Um, I think what felt really important to me was this way that like, yeah, again, the fact that Verona is just able to talk to Avery about this is not something she would have been able to do 6 months ago in the story. Um,
Mm.
so it's sort of really a sign of where Verona's got to, that she's proving herself wrong by being able to talk about this. I reckon, like the old Verona wouldn't have been able to even talk to Avery about this.
Mm.
Remember when Verona visited Avery in Thunder Bay and fucking hid in the bathroom with a like fucked up hand, like you know. Um, so yeah, I get it, but I think Avery is more right, and I also think this is like an important moment for Avery, because Avery is someone who thrives on being in touch with and knowing where her team is at. So there's almost a sense of like, even though Verona's really the one who's dumping here and Avery's supporting her, it's almost a good moment for Avery too, because it's helping her feel like she's like in touch with where Verona is, I guess. Like it's just a good moment because I think it's helping both of them.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I guess like something else. I feel like something that keeps coming up is, we talked more about Lucy and Avery in that Verona chapter that just happened. And now this is the Avery chapter. And I feel like we're talking almost more about Verona in this conversation. Like it feels like that might be a somewhat intentional part of like these are these chapters, right? Where the Kenneteers are fading into each other's banners. They're coming back together. It almost makes more sense that an Avery chapter is a bit less about Avery and more about like Verona and Lucy and like her reuniting with them, and similarly, like the Verona chapter was her thinking about Lucy and Avery as much as like what's going on with herself.
Mm.
Um, like it kind of makes sense to me that as they're coming together, their chapters are almost becoming more about the other people to sort of bridge that gap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting the team dynamics during this. I don't know, their exile.
It's gonna be so fun to see what it looks like when they fully re-emerge into each other's banners, because I feel
Mm.
like the moment the banners become fully all the three of them again, there's going to be some cool thing to coincide with it in story.
Yeah, true. I'm nervous about the Kennet others though. Like,
Mm.
what must be happening? I just want to know that everyone's okay.
I see. I still think it'd be so fun if we just don't hear for like 10 more
Oh
chapters.
my
I kind of
god.
want to get dumped into a Kennet that has like gone through some shit without them
Yeah.
and
Oh, yikes.
see what's happened.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, I guess. But yeah, so the Kenneteers summon the legal team to help vet their plan to take down the Alabaster. Sebastian and JT Poole are here to help.
Yeah. What the A team?
Yeah, no, but they do well. And hearing about all the horrible situations that the Ted girls put JT Poole through is rough. Like they
So
basically
funny
got
though.
yes, they got themselves into these like really fucked situations just for a laugh, which is pretty funny.
Yeah,
Paul must be
knowing
a
that she
hero
would have to bail
too.
them out.
Yeah,
It's so cruel.
it's pretty hilarious.
It reminds me of thinking back to how like me and my classmates would treat the substitute teachers
Mm,
at school, where like it seemed really funny at the time, but now I look back on it as an adult and I'm like, oh, well, little shits we were. Like that was just we were just trying to make someone stressed and feel terrible. Like why were we doing that? And I almost feel like Liberty in America are about 20% of the way there with JT. Like um but yeah, I don't know. It's funny as well as just like you're like, oh god, like what little assholes.
mm.
Um
Yeah.
like JT in general, well, like Avery thinks on this a bunch, but she sits in that like sort of type of character where it's like like you see rich people do this in some stories where it's like they've got like overqualified people because Anthem wants someone who can be a lawyer for that 0.1% of the time where she needs to be a lawyer, but like she's kind of overqualified because the majority of the job is the babysitting. So he's like he has her on retainer full time, but most of that time her qualifications are wasted, and so you get these people who are like just way better than the job they're doing, and that happens so
Mm,
much just in fucking the business world too. Um,
mm,
but it's like it feels to me like the human cost of like having multiple houses and each house having like apparently an entire shopping store's worth of clothes of all kinds. Like this is that's obviously kind of wasteful for like the Teds to be that wealthy and have that much, and this is like the human equivalent of like they're able to just buy people and kind of
mm,
only use them 1% of the time, and the rest of the time kind of leave them in storage or being wasted.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's so what do you think JT Poole's life is like outside of this retainer? You know?
Yeah, I hope she has hobbies.
Like I don't know. It's yeah, it must be strange.
Yeah, I mean, I assume she has other clients to some degree, or
Yes, you would
some sort
think.
of system for when she's not needed. I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. What a life she's led.
Mm,
I do love the like glimmer she gets in her eye when she's like, "Oh, this is the actual shit I wanted to do with my degree. Thank Christ."
mm. Yeah, a glimmer of hope.
But yeah. So getting into the conversation a bit, I
Mm,
also love There's just a handful of these moments where Sebastian Harless was just fucking killing me. Um, like where Verona's explaining Kennet found, and she's like, "Yeah, we had this massive power battery of realm energy," and he's like, "Oh, did you?" And like glances at Avery, and like Avery's just like, no comment. Like, just maybe it's just because the Thunder Bay politics is just always so fun, but that got a big chuckle out of me. And then there's that moment where Lucy's is talking about getting the goat, and she's like, "Oh, uh, maybe we can convince the Thunder Bay Council to give us the goat." And Avery's like,
No.
you might be overestimating people. Like, you, Lucy, have too much faith in crummy people right now, and I,
Yeah.
Avery, am the one telling you to have less faith in these people. Like that, it lands so strongly when it's Avery telling Lucy you overestimate people.
Yeah. I thought there was that funny moment where Harless is like exasperatedly like, please don't count on getting the code. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway, yeah, it's so the Kenneteers' plan seems sound, killing or dethroning the Alabaster. Although the fact that the Alabaster has lasted so long is a bit worrying. And of
yeah,
course, if they do dethrone the Alabaster is probably going to die.
yeah. And so there's like this is one of those classic pale conversations where there's sort of, because there's so many people involved, there's like a bunch of things coming up, and not all of them necessarily get addressed. Like, there is still,
Mm.
like you said, the Kenneteers' plan seems sound. It's sort of like, it's sound in theory, but my understanding is they're still not 100% sure how they're going to like pay for it.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not like, there's still some bits to iron out, and like, yeah, as you said, they've got to anticipate the Alabaster having some tricks up her sleeve, because the thread here is she wouldn't still be here if she didn't.
Mm.
But you're right. Obviously, the meat of the chapter is like the moral question being posed to the Kenneteers.
Mm. Yeah, I mean the moral question is, they're dismantling or trying to remove the Alabaster. Well, first of all, the Alabaster will have the option to just stand down. So, I mean, I think that's important
Yeah,
to know. Um,
but it's like, it reminds me of do you remember in Arc 4 the first time Lucy met Zed and Nina, and she called out Zed for like, yeah, okay, you said Nina could agree to this, but you knew that she wouldn't be able to say no because of what
mm,
she is, right? And
mm, mm,
that's essentially what they're doing with the Alabaster here. They're saying, "Oh, you can stand down," but they know that she almost certainly won't. So, like,
mm,
to a certain degree, you have to own the fact that that probably means you are killing her, and that's what America calls out to them. But yeah,
mm. Yeah. But yeah, so then they will remove the Alabaster from this power structure if possible, and that will then leave the Alabaster very open to being murdered, effectively.
yeah, yeah,
So, I don't know. I mean, they're not pulling any triggers.
yeah. I mean, Bristow comes up twice in this chapter, and that feels like an apt comparison, because they're essentially looking to do to the Alabaster what they did to Bristow. It's just, in Bristow's case, it was a bit of an accident, and so this is almost the Kenneteers being posed with the question: are you willing to do that again on purpose to somebody who's arguably not as bad as Bristow?
Mm,
Um, which is like a big question.
mm. Yeah.
I have to admit, I fall on the side of like kind of agreeing of like if she, it's not that they want to kill her or whatever, but she's in this big position, she's helping do bad stuff. Like, if the only option to get her to stop is for her to die, then like,
But it's
I
worth
guess.
noting they're not going to kill her. They're just removing her from a system that she's using to do harm.
Well, yeah, but the way that works is she's not allowed to leave unless she dies, right? Like
Mm,
she either has to change how she's doing it or die, or win,
mm.
I guess. But
Yes.
um, like this is where the Nina thing comes in. They kind of know that she's probably not going to be able to fold, like, just because of what she is in her being.
Mm,
So
mm,
like, I think that fuzzy line between, I think that does blur the line about whether or not they are actively pulling the trigger, because it's like, if you give someone a choice that it's like, oh, give me $10 million, I'll shoot you in the head. If that person doesn't have $10 million, they're getting shot in the head, and if you know they don't have $10 million, you knew what you were doing, right? Like,
mm. Yeah.
that's effectively, yeah, what Zed did to Nina and what they're doing to the Alabaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I still think it's probably right. It sucks, but like I think their logic is sound.
Yeah, I think so too.
Sebastian calls out how odd it is that the Alabaster is supporting Charles.
Yes.
Um, and that helps for me internally shift to like, yeah, like she's become more about being in the position than she has like doing what the position entails. Which is very much my vibe of the Alabaster in general. But I feel like that was the reason that point came up, was because it was like, yeah, it's she's more about being an Alabaster than she's about like helping people and doing the job to a degree. So I can like live more with the idea that like she's going to refuse to change how she's doing it, then we can't abide having her in the position anymore.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, like if somebody builds a system that makes it so they can't be removed from it, and is also using that system to do bad things, they've
Yeah,
contrived the situation. You know.
yeah, like yeah. You can just easily argue that she's not really giving the Kenneteers a choice by, yeah, setting that system up so that they either kill her or let her keep doing what she's doing.
Yeah, exactly right.
Um, yeah, it was just Derosha style. Everything's a binding if you think about it. Um, but yeah, I also think like the really important note to go along with all this is like this conversation really starts by defining what alabasters are, both like natural alabasters and the judges, because there's like a lot of conceptual overlap there. But like
Yes.
essentially, what we're being hit with is the alabaster is like law based with a capital L. Like she is old. There's the chance the other judges kind of congealed around her. Like she's the OG judge, and so it's like she's entrenched in the system, possibly been around since the start of it. She kind of is of it naturally. Like she's just naturally a legal thing, and it's like she's risen into this power that has kind of doubled down on it. It's very clearly sort of setting her up as this sort of metaphor for the wider sense of stability and safety and like concept of the system and the seal in this region. I think like I don't think this chapter is just asking the Kenneteers, "Are you okay with killing the Alabaster?" I think like the subtext is very much, "I like what are you willing to do to yeah, like, you know, the overall safety and stability of the region in order to stop Charles." Um, like, I don't know. I think I think this is why it's really important, that bit where America sort of speaks up and calls the Kenneteers out on this pattern they've got of like escalatingly taking out higher forces, because it doesn't just stop with the Alabaster. If they take out the Alabaster, that's 1 out of 4. Like they're going to keep going, and so. Like, yeah, this isn't just about the Alabaster. This is almost the Kenneteers being asked to draw their line of like, you know, Kennet is as much at war with the failures of the seal as Charles is, and how violent are they willing to get in their version, because they were the slow burn play, and Charles has now forced them to accelerate stuff, and it's kind of like, okay, what are they willing to do?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's I, I mean they're constantly being forced to inch their moral lines further and further along,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like this was the sort of thing, is that Mrs. whole plan, like the original Kenneteer 1.0 plan, was that they weren't meant to actively disrupt the system. They were just meant to sort of show that there was a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And now what they're talking about is much closer to the sort of thing Charles would do. So, yeah, like I think this is a really important question, and it's not just the Alabaster. Like the Alabaster is very clearly set up as representative of like the Alabaster is the sort of thing where like that's the way back. Like if Charles gets killed by someone else or whatever, like something like the Alabaster is kind of the like we can go back to normal sort of thing. And the Kenneteers taking the Alabaster out is really them sort of saying, no, we're not going back to normal. We're building something new.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's also worth pointing out, just before we move on from that whole conversation, like in the Avery chapter, that the wolf and deer imagery comes up like a fair bit, like because I think that that decision that's being presented to the Kenneteers expresses itself in Avery as like she's very much kept the wolf and deer parts of herself separate. She's either playing the deer and being a good bean, or she's playing the wolf when somebody really deserves it.
Yeah.
And this plan, she directly calls out, this is asking her to play the deer, but with like a wolf's shadow, and that's a different vibe for Avery. She's usually very either overtly against you when you deserve it, or your best friend. And it's a big step for the Kenneteers in general to kind of be, yeah, like I guess sort of working so overtly against things while playing to the niceties of stuff. Like they usually
Mm,
when they're your enemy, it's very like I don't
mm,
know, fair and backed and stuff. So that like
mm.
that's sort of going to be, I think, the interesting thing to track with Avery and all this is how she's coping with that line between the deer and the wolf blurring a
Yeah,
little bit, especially as they're literally trying to kill the doe, like the other big deer. It's obviously like a funny parallel.
yeah, yeah. You're right. It is it's a good image, isn't it? Every being the wolf to take down the deer. Um, but so yeah, the Canadians make the call. They're going to go with this plan, despite it probably leading to the Alabaster's death. And what a grim final line of Avery saying, "Yes, I'll get my stuff." Like it's very tonally, very grim that they're kind of accepting that they're going to have to kill somebody.
Yeah, it really like the chapter sort of ends, yeah, with Avery saying that right after saying, "Yeah, look, we're probably going to kill her, and I am going to live with that." And then just, "I'll get my stuff" is so like you're like, "Oh, we're heading into grim work." You're right. Like it's yeah. This is so exciting. Like I feel like we still don't fully know what their plan is, right? Like we know they're cooking up some big city magic-y idea that's got big costs and it challenges the alabaster, but I haven't been able to quite figure out what that entails.
Mm,
Um, yeah, it should be fun.
mm, yeah.
And they're gonna do the distract Charles plan by making him fight some shitty challenger.
Yes, which
Uh,
is very funny.
yeah, I can't wait to see his reaction to that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the end of the
Yeah.
chapters.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It also worth pointing out they're heading to Ottawa apparently.
Ottawa. Yes.
To deal with the Lord of Ottawa, and
Mm-hmm.
that could be very fun because I'm just thinking like Ottawa. I think is like Canada's Canberra, like as in it's between Toronto and Montreal,
Mm,
which are the two big cities, but Ottawa is like the political capital.
mm,
So I feel like the ward vibe there should be really interesting to explore because it's I don't know, yeah, like I know the Canberra comparison isn't helping anyone who's not from Australia. I guess Washington would be the equivalent of like it's not this metropolis like Toronto or Montreal would presumably be, but Ottawa is the one where it's like there's going to be some weirdly entrenched powers there, and hearing how they're responding to Charles and all that because they were able to fend him off should be really fun.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it'll be really interesting to see what this Lord is
Yeah.
like.
And it's right near Montreal too. I've been wondering if the Montreal witch hunters would come back. Actually, I was thinking because earlier in the week I was like, I could see the Montreal witch hunters not hating Charles
Mm,
in a lot of ways. Like if we think back to
mm,
Cleo and what her whole deal was, like they were getting angry kids and giving them witch hunter stuff and pointing them at practitioners, and like there's a lot of conceptual synergy to go on there.
mm.
So if the Montreal witch hunters were to come back as Charles's allies, like that wouldn't be the most shocking revelation. Like
Yeah.
just what this story needs is like a dozen more Cleos.
Yeah. It's yeah, sure. Why not? Let's say that. Um, but yeah, so well, those are our chapters for this week, I suppose. But the show's not over yet. We've got a discussion question that we wanted to dive into. Our discussion question this week was: tell us your favorite urban legend from your country. Less
Um,
urban legends out there than I thought, Elliot.
Yeah, I mean, this was also a show. I remember, like the last
True.
episode only came
Came
out
out
about 3 days
3
before
years
we're recording
ago.
this.
Yep.
So it was always a bit doomed. But yeah, so we've just got two quick answers to this one. Pull up propaganda pagodas to start, which was talking about like they grew up in the Midwest. And they said most of their urban legends were like fairly generic stuff, like guy with antlers tied to something bad is going after like the children you're telling this story to. Um, or it's just stuff where like a person got like a terrible injury and you know just like a bummer. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, like I do think it's fun. There are those sorts of like universal urban legends like that.
mm,
Like I can definitely think of ones near where I grew up that fit both of those categories.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, it's interesting that I do think a fair amount of urban legends like this don't hold up that well. They just are bummers.
Yeah, yeah. Like all the hook hand stuff. Like I assume Propaganda Pagoda is talking about hook hand adjacent sort of
Yes,
stories.
yes. We also got a response from Beleg Tal listing a bunch of cryptids, which I think do count as urban
Yeah,
legends. Sasquatch, of course, a classic. The Wendigo, which I also uh, am familiar with, of course, from Supernatural.
Supernatural.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, of course. Yep.
Somebody who eats human flesh and becomes a human obsessed, kind of human eating obsessed monster, I guess.
It's werewolf adjacent sort of vibes,
Yeah,
but with
definitely.
cannibalism.
More
Yeah.
cannibalism, yeah. And then the Ogo Pogo, which is one I haven't heard of before, but is very interesting looking. Beleg Tal describes it as a lake monster similar to Nessie, which, yes, a lake monster said to inhabit Okanagan Lake in Canada.
Yeah. Do we
Which is
have
interesting.
any? Because like obviously, like Australia has the Yowie, which is like
Yes.
our like Sasquatch equivalent, like the Indigenous
Yeah.
Australian sort of. I remember being terrified of a billabong near my house growing up because I'd read about Yowies and I was convinced they were real and that there must have
Mm,
been one living in that billabong near me. Um,
mm.
but like I don't think we have any Nessies. Like
Bunyips. Bunyips are a Indigenous Australian water
yeah,
cryptid.
but they're not like Nessies, are they? They're more
No, they're
they're
the
like big crocodile like things, right?
yeah. I'm looking them up now. The picture I'm seeing here is almost like a saber tooth esque thing.
Yeah, I
Um,
think people assume that the physical
Quadrupedal.
descriptions are based on. There used to be like those 3 meter tall, like giant wombats. Were they
Mm,
called Dipleurodon or something? So it's
mm,
like a oral tradition about those.
mm.
But yeah, but they're more like yeah. I think they work in stories more like crocodiles, where they get you when you go near the water.
Yes, I think so. I think so. Do we have a Nessie equivalent? I don't
I
think
mean, there's
so.
like oh, I think there's a lot of Dreamtime stuff about giant snakes that live in the like giant sea
Yeah,
snakes and stuff, but
yeah,
um, I don't know if that counts.
yeah. Maybe it's because we have like, um, like crocodiles as a actual thing that's in the water that will fuck you
Yeah,
up. I don't
we
know.
didn't need them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't need to make up giant evil sea creatures. We already got them.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, interesting. I do love finding out about urban legends. We just got one posted in chat from Zachary, the Barbados steel donkey, which is a donkey, looks like a donkey, eyes on fire, sometimes fire breathing, clanking chain. The donkey has been associated with stones landing on houses without anyone in sight seen to have been throwing them, which is a fun link. I like that. Yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah, that reminds me of like, because isn't there a bunch of like weird powers that the Mothman or something is meant to have that are just very clearly like a sound spooked someone during the night and they blamed it on the Mothman?
Mm,
Like, yeah.
mm,
Anyway,
yeah. But yeah, so thanks everyone for leaving your answers to our discussion question. Of course, we have a new discussion question. So this week, leave us in our discussion thread. Yep, leave us your answer to the question: which fairy court would you sell yourself to? Assuming that you had to sell yourself to one for the memes, so that JT had to come get
yeah, and yeah, credit to Mirth Strike and My Tallest for pitching this discussion question in the chat.
you.
We did not come prepared with one, but I like this.
Yeah.
If you need a refresher, the extra material just after 5.2 is the one that outlines all of the various fairy courts. So that's the place to go to get pro tips on which one you'd pick.
Mm.
And the answer, none of them is not
Yeah, not
valid.
acceptable for sure. Cool. So yeah, leave your answer to that in our discussion thread, which you can find linked in the show notes down below. And while you're in those show notes, why not also follow the link that might be in them to check out our Twitter at PowerEffectCast.
It's not in there. There is a link to the costume contest though.
Mm.
Click that one. Start planning your costumes, win fun prizes, and also, I mean, you got to dress up in a Wildbow themed Halloween costume so that you can
Mm-hmm.
go out and tell people about Wildbow stuff.
Yep. So you can
Because it's
evangelize.
It's not. Yeah, it's not obnoxious if you're doing it on Halloween because you're explaining your
Yeah, I
outfit.
think that's legit. If you do it on Halloween, it's legit. As said previously, you can find more information about that on the website doofmedia.com, as well as other information about all the other shows on the Doof Media network.
Yes, we are also on Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia. Without that Patreon, we wouldn't still be doing this, and we wouldn't be able to be planning all the fun stuff that we've got cooking up for All Packed Up 2 one day.
Yeah. If you want to support things like All Packed Up 2, All Piled Up Beyond the Pale, the events that we do like this and things like the costume contest exist because of our patrons. Supporting us at patreon.com/doofmedia. So become one, you can help stuff like this happen, and you also get access to all kinds of bonuses, like bonus shows.
Yes, and lastly, Wildbow has a Patreon as well, patreon.com/Wildbow. Without it, he can't afford to torture people like JT in his spare time.
Yeah.
He's the other client. We talked about it before. It turns out she only has one other client, and it's Wildbow. He's constantly up to mischief.
Yeah. But yeah, go and support him at patreon.com/Wildbow. All right, folks. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us.
See you next week.
Bye.